Can logic alone prove God exists? In the 11th century, a monk named Anselm of Canterbury dared to say yes, and his reasoning still fascinates us today. Anselm was born in Aosta, in Italy, in the year 1033. He became a Benedictine monk, later Archbishop of Canterbury, and is remembered as one of the great doctors of the Church. He lived in a world very different from ours, a medieval Europe marked by faith, but also by political conflict and intellectual searching. And into this world he brought a new kind of clarity. For Anselm, faith and reason were never enemies. He described his approach as fides quaerens intellectum, faith seeking understanding. Faith was the starting point, not the end of thought. This meant that for Anselm, believing in God was not enough. He wanted to understand why belief in God was rational, inevitable, and necessary. This led him to craft one of the boldest arguments ever made, the ontological proof for God's existence. Not an argument from nature, but from the very idea of God itself. But before we dive into the argument, let's reflect on why Anselm thought it mattered. He was writing prayers, meditations, reflections, trying to lift the mind to God. The argument was not cold mathematics. It was a prayer of the heart, a way of saying, Lord, let me not only believe in you, but see with reason that you are. So what is the question? It is the oldest question of all. Does God exist? But Anselm approaches it differently. He does not look outward to the stars. He looks inward. Imagine the simplest thought of God. Not yet the Trinity, not Scripture, not miracles. Just one idea. God is that being greater than which nothing can be conceived. This definition is the heart of Anselm's thought. If we can think of a greatest possible being, what would that mean? And could such a being exist only in the mind? Already the challenge begins. Anselm knows there are fools who say in their heart, there is no God. But he wants to show that even the fool, when he hears the word God, understands what is meant. And here is where the argument takes form. If God exists only in the mind as an idea, then we could imagine something greater, a God who exists in reality as well. Therefore, by the very logic of the definition, God must exist in reality. Otherwise, he would not be the greatest conceivable being. The idea demands existence. This is the ontological argument in its seed, so daring, so simple, and yet so profound that it has stirred philosophers for nearly 1,000 years. But before we explain it fully, we must walk with Anselm through the steps, for he knew the mind resists and the heart struggles to accept such clarity. In the next part, we will see the argument unfold. How from a single definition of God, Anselm believes we can arrive at the certainty that he truly exists. Faith seeks understanding, and for Anselm, understanding leads us back to faith, stronger, deeper, more unshakable. Let us follow his reasoning. Let us now unfold Anselm's argument. It begins with a definition. God is that being greater than which nothing can be conceived. Even the atheist, when he hears this phrase, understands what it means. He may deny such a being exists, but he grasps the idea in his mind. So at the very least, God exists as an idea. The concept is there in the intellect, but Anselm asks, could God exist only in the mind and not in reality? Suppose God exists only as a thought. Then we could imagine something greater, a God who exists not only in the mind, but also in the world outside of us. But by definition, God is the greatest conceivable being, and a being that exists in reality is greater than one that exists only in the mind. Therefore, God must exist in reality. Otherwise, the very definition would collapse. We would be conceiving of a greatest being that is not truly the greatest, because something greater could be imagined. This is the sharp point of Anselm's logic. God's existence is not an optional add-on. It is contained in the very meaning of the word God. To deny his existence is to contradict oneself. Think of it like this. When we imagine a triangle, we know that 3 sides and 3 angles are necessary. They belong to its definition. To imagine a triangle without them is absurd. So too with God. The greatest conceivable being cannot lack existence. Existence belongs to his essence. He is the one being who cannot not exist. This is why Anselm calls God necessary being. Everything else might or might not exist, but God's existence is not optional. It is essential, inevitable, absolute. Notice also how different this is from Aquinas. Thomas argued from motion, causality, order, from the world outside us. Anselm argues from the concept of God itself. He does not point to stars or rivers. He points to the very logic of thought. And he says, the mind itself reveals that God cannot fail to be. For Anselm, this was not dry logic, it was a prayer. He wrote the argument in his proslogion while seeking God with tears and devotion. O Lord, he prays, I do not seek to understand in order that I may believe, but I believe in order that I may understand. The argument was an act of worship. Now, of course, not everyone agreed. Some objected strongly, even in Anselm's time. But before we look at criticisms, we must see the full beauty of what he attempted. For what Anselm offered was not just a proof, but a vision, that God's existence is so bound up with his very nature that it cannot be denied. It was daring, it was new, it was bold, and it continues to echo in every debate about faith and reason, but objections soon came, and serious ones. In the next part, we will see how critics responded. We will hear from a monk named Gaunilo, who thought Anselm's logic went too far, and we will ask, can his argument hold? No great idea goes unchallenged, and Anselm's ontological argument was criticized almost immediately after he proposed it. One of the earliest critics was Gaunilo, a fellow Benedictine monk. Gaunilo respected Anselm, but thought the reasoning was flawed. Gaunilo used a famous analogy. Imagine the greatest possible island. By Anselm's logic, if we can conceive it, then it must exist in reality. But clearly, imagining a perfect island does not make it real. So why should imagining a greatest being prove that God exists? This is a serious objection. It challenges whether Anselm's definition really forces us to accept existence. Perhaps it only plays with words. How does Anselm respond? He says Gaunilo's example misses the point. Islands are contingent. Their perfection depends on external features. One can always add another palm tree, a softer beach, a gentler breeze. There is no maximum island, no necessary perfection of that kind. But the concept of God is different. God is not the greatest thing of a kind. He is the being greater than which nothing at all can be conceived. This is not like imagining a bigger mountain. It is about a being whose greatness is unlimited and absolute. Such a being cannot lack existence. Anselm insists that the logic applies only to God. Only God is conceived as necessary, self-existent, the fullness of being. Nothing else fits that description. Centuries later, philosophers like Kant would also criticize the argument, saying existence is not a real predicate, not a quality that makes something greater. For Kant, saying God exists does not add to the concept of God, any more than saying 100 real coins adds to the idea of 100 coins. But Anselm's defenders reply, God is not like coins or islands. If he is the greatest conceivable being, existence belongs to his very essence. This debate shows why the ontological proof remains so fascinating. It pushes the limits of reason, forcing us to think about existence itself. Some find it unconvincing, others see in it a luminous insight, but all agree it opened a new chapter in the dialogue between faith and reason. And Anselm himself never saw it as a cold, airtight formula. He saw it as prayerful reasoning, meant to lift the mind to God. Even if objections remain, Anselm showed that the very concept of God is unlike any other concept. It points beyond thought itself. And that is why, to this day, Christians, atheists, and philosophers alike still wrestle with his argument. It refuses to be ignored. In the next part, we will see how Anselm's vision connects with faith, for beyond logic, he shows us a God who draws the mind and heart together. For Anselm, the ontological argument was never just an intellectual puzzle. It was a way of praying with the mind, a journey where reason bows before God. He believed that faith and reason are not enemies, but allies. Reason clarifies what faith holds. Faith inspires reason to seek deeper. This is why his motto is so famous: Fides quaerens intellectum, faith seeking understanding. Faith comes first, but it longs to understand. Think of a friend you love. You already trust them, already believe in their goodness, but love moves you to know them more, to understand their thoughts and desires. So too with God. Faith says, "Lord, I believe." Reason then asks, "Help me to understand you better." Anselm's argument is the fruit of that desire. In his proslogion, the argument unfolds in the middle of a prayer. The text is filled with worship, tears, longing. The proof is woven into devotion. He cries, "O Lord, you are greater than anything I can imagine, and yet you draw near to the humble. Lift my mind so that I may glimpse your truth." This union of logic and love is what makes Anselm unique. He shows us that to think deeply about God is already an act of worship. And this insight shaped Christian thought for centuries. Medieval thinkers like Bonaventure and Aquinas built on his vision of harmony between faith and reason. Even when Aquinas rejected the ontological proof, he admired Anselm's spirit, a faith so confident that it dares to engage the mind fully. For Anselm, reason was a gift from God, a lamp placed in the human heart. To use it to seek God was to honor the creator of reason itself. And this vision still speaks to us today. In a world where many think faith is blind, Anselm reminds us faith seeks the light, it hungers for clarity. And in a world where reason is often proud, forgetting its limits, Anselm reminds us reason bows before mystery. It finds fulfillment only in God. This balance is why Anselm is called the father of scholasticism. He laid the groundwork for centuries of theology that used reason in the service of faith. But Anselm was not only a thinker, he was a pastor, a leader, a man of courage. He defended the freedom of the church against kings who sought to control it. Exiled twice from Canterbury, he never abandoned his flock. He combined sharp reason with deep humility and became a model of Christian leadership. So when we study his argument, we are not reading a detached philosopher. We are meeting a saint, a man whose thought was born of prayer. Faith and reason, logic and love, prayer and philosophy, all are united in Anselm's vision, and that is why he still matters today. In our final part, we will reflect on his lasting legacy. What does Anselm teach us now in a skeptical, restless age? As we conclude, let us ask, why does Saint Anselm still matter today? Why return to a monk of the 11th century in our skeptical modern age? First, because he shows us that faith is not blind. Faith does not close its eyes, it opens them wider and invites reason to share in its vision. Second, because he shows us that reason itself points beyond itself. When reason reflects honestly, it discovers its own limits, and those limits point to God. Third, because his courage unites thought and life. Anselm was not just a thinker in a cloister, he was a bishop who suffered exile and a shepherd who gave his life for the church. His argument continues to echo in philosophy. Some reject it, some admire it, but no one ignores it. It still sparks debate after nearly 1,000 years. And in theology, his motto still guides us: Fides quaerens intellectum, faith seeking understanding. It is the heartbeat of Christian thought. For us today, it means this: do not be afraid to ask questions. Do not be afraid to use reason. God gave us minds to seek him. And do not be afraid of doubts. Even doubts can become prayers if they lead us to search, to wrestle, to seek. Faith does not fear reason, it welcomes it. And when reason runs out, when logic reaches its limits, faith carries us further. Together they lead us to God. St. Anselm teaches us that believing in God is not irrational. It is the most rational act of all, for it fulfills both heart and mind. So can logic alone prove God exists? Perhaps the debate will never end. But Anselm reminds us of something deeper. The very desire to seek God is itself a gift. Our hearts are restless, Augustine once wrote, until they rest in you. Anselm's logic is one way the heart speaks, a prayer in the language of reason. And that is why his words endure. For every generation they whisper the same truth. God is not an idea. He is reality itself. So let us follow Anselm's path. Let faith seek understanding. Let reason bow to mystery. And let both lead us to worship. For God is truly that being greater than which nothing can be conceived, and the mind that sees this bows in awe before him. Thank you for joining this journey through the thought of St. Anselm. If you found it helpful, subscribe and continue learning with us. Faith, reason, philosophy, prayer, all are welcome here. Let us walk together toward God, the source of truth, love, and life itself.